It's another day. That can only mean one thing. It's time for another Today's Decay. Right, Louis? December 17th. We have a star-studded lineup today, don't we? Yeah. Today. Throughout history. Here's what happened on this very day. In 1923, the burlesque performer and cheesecake magazine model Lily the cat, was born. 1923. Rather quite striking. And on this day in 1927, the film London After Midnight premiered, starring Lon Chaney Sr. and directed by Todd Browning. It is a lost film. I'm part of a horror host spook show troupe called Phantom Creep Theater. And we perform different times of the year, I guess. But mostly we performed in Coney Island on either the Coney Island Sideshow stage or upstairs in the museum throughout the late spring, summer, and into the fall. Usually like monthly. And so what we would do was like similar to spook show performers in the 30s through 50s-ish, maybe 60s. You'd have like morbid magicians who would perform before feature-length monster movies or in between double features. And they would call people up from the audience, saw off their arms, turn them into beasts, conjure ghosts that would then leave the stage and hover over the audience's heads, form some sort of ritual where bugs would wind up crawling over everybody in the audience, all sorts of stuff like that, right? So, Phantom Creep Theater, what we would do once a year, we would do these Lon Chaney Shall Not Die events, where we would screen a Lon Chaney Sr. feature film, which were almost all silent. So we had live musical accompaniment by Decomposer, one of the group, and we do some sort of stage play and almost like a Pee Wee Herman-esque setup that involved conjuring a lost Lon Chaney Sr. movie, like unearthing a script from one of his multiple films that are lost to time. So we've done Thunder, the film that in part resulted in his untimely death. We've done A Blind Bargain, a very overlooked, almost like Island of Dr. Moreau, mad scientist type film. And we did his most famous lost film, London After Midnight. And the way we did these were, because they weren't silent movies to begin with, we'd have the performers pantomime their lines and have digital projected intertitles behind them, and then Decomposer playing live music over it. So as if it's like a live silent film. And we're not doing a stage play that's an hour to an hour and a half long in runtime, but really cutting it down to like a digest version of 10 minutes, maybe 15 at the very most, right? And so what we were using for the source material, because like the movie's lost, the negatives are lost, no prints, you name it, gone. The only thing that exists are film stills. And if you're lucky enough, you can track down the shooting script, which was reprinted in like 1985, something like that. Here, London After Midnight. So what they did, and this was Philip J. Riley along with Forey Ackerman, printed like this is the shooting script for the movie. So you can actually read it even though the movie's gone. And they added to it a stills from the film and then try to put together like the actual lines and content that way, so you can like somewhat follow the story this way. Yeah, so this is the shooting script, and we did a live version of it in cut down form a couple of years ago. But what's particularly interesting about this is They also made photoplay novelizations of the movie, as they did for plenty of films back then, because movies like, in this case, 27, had a really short time in the theater, like, days in some cases. Like, if they weren't runaway successes, they could be you could miss them if they were, if you were sick for 2 days or something like that. Yeah. So one of the things they did was they made these photoplay novelizations. So it's like the movie, but then with stills from the film interspersed throughout it. And this is an original photoplay from 27, as written by Mary Coolidge Rask, because this wasn't like source material that came from a novel. Sometimes, like if it was like Bram Stoker's Dracula, they just like put Bela Lugosi on the cover and a couple of stills from the film, but it's really, you're reading like, the original novel. In this case, they wrote them based off the shooting scripts. So is that actually the final shooting script? Because if you were to read the novel, there's like an entire other Lon Chaney Sr. character that doesn't make it into the Turner Classic Movies photo restoration version or the shooting script version, that he's like a visiting old army buddy from India or something like that. That like so he winds up playing 3 different characters. He's the inspector, he's the man in the beaver hat, and he's this like old time war buddy who just happens to show up. And is that something that like Mary Coolidge Rask just put in to pad it out more? It doesn't make any sense. I don't know. So we included both aspects of the shooting script and the photoplay because they were both period accurate for 27. Whatever made it into the final version of the movie, I don't know. But we included them both. And for those of you that can't track this down, there was a repro of the Mary Coolidge Rask book or novelization here, which is like, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago. And it's pretty nice. Yeah. So I would suggest it. It's good stuff. Right. So there you go. Some of the mysteries of London After Midnight remain to this day. And people keep saying that they've found prints of it, and I guess one day it could be true, but it hasn't happened yet, and I don't really... who knows? Could happen. Yeah. People keep finding various thought to be lost film negatives or prints, like 80 years after the fact. So maybe one day London After Midnight. But if so, it may wind up making it a less exciting film, in part because it's always fun to think like, what if? But supposedly Groucho Marx may have taken his like walk from the Man in the Beaver Hat, Lon Chaney vampire character, which like in hindsight afterwards would come off as like just too weird, funny, odd. I don't know. Yeah, so who knows? I guess, be careful what you ask for. You might just get it. And also, this is one of those movies that fits into the like old dark house type setup of a pre-Dracula Scooby-Doo-esque template where like there's no such thing as supernatural. It's always just a man in a rubber mask. So, if you're coming into this expecting like actual vampires, you're going to be sorely mistaken. Sorry. So while the film doesn't exist, Todd Browning did kind of sort of remake it as Mark of the Vampire with Lugosi and Carol Borland. Not exactly the same movie, but not too far off. So you get a good sense, I think, of like what this movie would have been. It's certainly worth it. Yeah. So there you go. London After Midnight. That's the whole story. And on this day, 1936, British rocker Tommy Steele was born. Often wearing the iconic Music Note sweater, which I should have worn today. Right? Oh, well. Poor planning on my part. 1957, the film Curse of the Demon premiered. Alternately titled Night of the Demon by Jacques Tourneur, Maurice Tourneur's son. Jacques learned filmmaking from both his father and producer Val Lewton in the 40s he worked with, and made this quintessential film based off the short story Casting the Runes, which I'm in the middle of reading for a Weird Tales book club that I have to keep going with because it's tomorrow and I'm behind. Yeah. 1958. None other than Penelope Houston was born of the Avengers. And it will be a cheap tragedy if you don't tune in tomorrow for more Today's Decay. So there you go. That's your rundown for the day. Enjoy. Till tomorrow. Goodbye.